stage. I'm going to just say a few things about Harald, my colleague, the assistant editor of Modern Stoicism, who joined a little bit earlier this year. And I can tell you, as the editor of Modern Stoicism, he has made my life in many ways so much easier. So there's that. He's also a graduate student of philosophy at the University of Oslo, working on a number of topics, particularly on proairesis and conception of free will. And he is the person who organized the Oslo Stoics, and along with Logan, and I think I'm going to mangle his name, Valangdam, they organized the first Stoicon-x Norway, hopefully first but not last of those. So I'm going to turn this over to Harald, who curated all of these talks, and then we're going to play all of them for you.
Thank you, Greg. That's very generous. I'd like to add that Martina also participated in Stoicon-x Norway. So we have a third organizer. So thank you, and thanks to all the speakers, Alison McComb, Chris Halbert, Anup Tiwari, Rafael Pereira, Tim Iverson, Stoic Dan, and the Heart, Simon Drew, Pankaj Pradhananga, Sharon Labelle, and Andi Slane. I would also like to thank Greg for editing the videos and Andi for creating the slides. And finally, Phil for doing all the technology stuff and for playing the video whenever it's ready. Thank you.
My name is Sharon Labelle, and I'm the author of this book, The Art of Living, the classical manual on virtue, happiness, and effectiveness. It's a modern interpretation of the great Stoic teacher Epictetus, and an international perennial classic. Welcome to a day in the life of a modern Stoic. Here are a few words about how Stoicism can elevate the quality of each day. When we embrace any framework for living our best life, be it spiritual, religious, practical, or philosophical, we notice it is human nature to drift and return. Drift and return, drift and return. Inhale, exhale. And so it goes with living Stoic teachings. Popularizers of Stoic wisdom, of which I'm one, have been accused of oversimplifying otherwise more nuanced and sophisticated teachings. Fair enough. However, when we're in the thick of our daily lives, pulled in countless directions by the myriad claims on our attention, some beneficent, some neutral, some pernicious, the easiest thing in the world is to drift from our ideals. Say, to opt for expediency over nobility, efficiency over caring, processing or merely managing over deep engagement. For example, drift, plain and simple. This is our lives on the ground. This is real. And what we need is simplicity, not erudition. We save deep textual analysis for another time because we're dog paddling. So what can pull us back from drift? What can give our souls anchorage amidst the chaos of our workaday lives? How do we recover that sought after Stoic serenity we hear so much about? Do we wait until the time is right? When we are at our leisure to practice philosophical contemplation? I don't think so. Life is too busy lifing away. And besides, now is the time to embody virtue. Not 10 minutes from now and not next week, right now. When we're navigating life's vicissitudes, most of us don't have the time to carefully deliberate all the decisions, big and small, we need to make in any given day. Virtue is exercised in the interstices, in the in-between moments. We need to respond quickly and wisely to whatever life throws at us. Well, I believe our minds and hearts are tugged back to home base, to clarity, and to our philosophical principles most easily by the mnemonics of simple, wise maxims mined from the Stoic tradition. So I'll share a few of my favorites from The Art of Living as examples. Things themselves don't hurt or hinder us, nor do other people. How we view these things is another matter. This is self-explanatory if we remember just this notion and adopt it as our MO. We move away from the drama of petty resentments toward ease and elegant tranquility. And this can happen in an instant. Every moment can be a pivot point, after all. Here's another. Wisdom is revealed through action, not talk. Again, pure, simple truth. Enough with declaiming and explaining. Every moment is an opportunity for demonstrating virtue, whether others are looking or not. Finally, give your best and always be kind. Enough said. I invite you to find your own personal Stoic maxims for maximal living, and best wishes to each of you always.
Hello Global Stoics, my name is Simon Drew, coming to you from the Sunshine Coast in Australia. And I'm really honoured to be able to share with you just a brief snippet of Stoic wisdom today. And when Gregory Sadler mentioned to me that they were kind of seeking these little brief moments of Stoic wisdom to put throughout the program, I started thinking, well, if I could just share one little lesson, what would it be? And so I started thinking back on the past few years, because I've had the real honor of taking many people from around the world on this path of personal transformation through philosophy, and particularly through Stoicism. And so I've worked with people from different cultures, from different backgrounds, from different religious views, from different philosophical views, from all around the world. And I started to think, I have to find something that I've shared with all these people that has worked for them, that has also really worked for me in my life, because that means that it's a strong idea, that it definitely works, and it's going to be useful for you guys. So I'm going to share with you one of the pieces of wisdom that came from Epictetus that I've shared with a lot of people, and that I know this works, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with some of you as well. So I'm going to read this. It actually comes from Sharon Lebel's interpretation of Epictetus's sayings, The Art of Living. You have to grab this if you haven't already. So he says the following: Philosophy's purpose is to illuminate the ways our soul has been infected by unsound beliefs, untrained tumultuous desires, and dubious life choices and preferences that are unworthy of us. Self-scrutiny applied with kindness is the main antidote. So I want to focus on that equation that Epictetus gives us there for personal transformation. Self-scrutiny applied with kindness. Now, I actually think that most of us who are kind of called to the path of philosophy already get that self-scrutiny element. And I think we actually oftentimes can go way too far with it. We don't know how to properly scrutinize with ourselves. What it usually looks like is we're just beating ourselves up constantly. We're constantly mad at ourselves for going outside of our better principles, or for going against our diet, or for going against our philosophical regime, or it's as if we're just tyrants over ourselves, constantly looking for our flaws. But what Epictetus reminds us of here is that you need to give yourself self-kindness as well, that space to grow into a new way of being, that forgiveness for the fact that you're a vulnerable human being who is not perfect. As the Christians might say, nobody reaches the glory of God, or as the Stoics would say, nobody attains the level of the sage. Listen, none of us are the sage. And so we're not going to be perfect, but so much of the time we act as if we should be somewhere that we're not. And so I just think that this is one of those pieces of wisdom that I've shared with so many people, and they've all come back to me and said, that's one of the most valuable lessons that I've learned, is to be kinder to myself. It's kind of like what Jordan Peterson says. He says, you need to treat yourself as if you're somebody worth taking care of, because you are. And I want to give you one little analogy here that I would often give to people when I was working as a gym manager. Because I'd see everybody who would come in, I saw about 1,000 people come in and join the gym over a year. And I met with every single one of these people. And one of the things that I would often tell people is, listen, if you go against your diet, let's say you eat a Snickers bar, the worst thing that you can do is start beating yourself up for the fact that you've just eaten a Snickers bar and start being annoyed with yourself and stressed that you've gone against your diet. And here's why. Because your body is then going to shut down the fat burning process because you're releasing all of these stress hormones into your body, right? And that literally shuts down that process. So you're actually working counter to your aims by beating yourself up for something like that. And I think that the same thing happens in our journey of transformation through philosophy, where too much of the time we're too hard on ourselves, and it actually stunts our growth. It actually stops us from being able to see the progress that we're making, right? And so I think that ultimately what I try to instill in people is, yeah, we need the self-scrutiny, but it's got to be a healthy kind that's also balanced with you actually taking care of yourself and giving yourself some compassion, giving yourself some kindness. As it says in the Tao Te Ching, nature doesn't hurry, but everything is accomplished, right? You've got to give yourself that space to grow, that space to become something new. And you can do that by starting today to be a little bit kinder to yourself. Man, it works miracles. So I just want to encourage you all to try that. Please try being kinder to yourselves. Try giving yourself that space, and I know that it's going to really help you on your journey of transformation. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you all, and I hope that we get to speak again soon.
Hi, my name is Rafael Rodrigues Pereira. I'm a university professor here in Brazil, in the Federal University of Goiás, UFG, where I have some research on Stoicism, and I'm here today to talk about, to compare the ancient notion of eudaimonia with the modern notion of happiness. Are they the same thing? Are they different? So the point is that both eudaimonia and modern happiness have some subjective and objective components. Richard Kraut talks about it in a paper called Two Conceptions of Happiness. So he says that both eudaimonia and modern happiness has subjective and objective components. So the difference, there is a difference, but there's a difference of emphasis. Because the emphasis in eudaimonia is more on the objective idea of human flourishing as a rational agent. But it has also a subjective component. When, for instance, when Aristotle says that the virtuous person has pleasure in acting virtuously, or the Stoic notion of ataraxia, the mental peace of tranquility. So the good life for the ancients is an objective idea, but it's important that the agent enjoys and appreciates this life. And the modern notion of happiness, the emphasis is more in the subjective side. But it's not completely subjective. It has also an objective component. We don't think, for instance, that a person would be happy if the pleasure mental state would be produced by drugs or medicaments. So we still have the idea that happiness is to live a certain kind of life. So they're not so different after all. And this is important to understand how eudaimonistic ethics, ancient, like Stoicism, can still have some interest for us today. And the idea that happiness, the modern moral theories, they tend to separate happiness and moral. And eudaimonistic ethics don't do that. They think that if you think about what the good life is in a more rational way, this will lead you to an ethical point of view. You understand that the best life the good life, is an ethical life, a life where you flourish as a human being and you become virtuous. So this idea is also applicable today because we are still able to discuss what happiness is, because happiness for us is more subjective, but it's not completely subjective. So we still have some objective components that allow us to discuss what is the good life. And so we can understand what the ancients do. But when they do that, when they discuss what the good life is. But for that, it's important to notice that we are still able to discuss what is to be rational. And this idea of to flourish as a rational agent, which is to be virtuous. And this will make us happier in the sense of eudaimonia, and also somehow in our modern sense of happiness, because the virtuous person is more resilient. There is the relation to fortune, tyche, which was very important in ancient discussions about eudaimonia, and also is relevant for us today. How to deal with life setbacks. So this is a way in which we can start to discuss how why the virtuous person is happy even for us. So that's what I had to say. I'm glad to be here in Stoicon. Thank you very much.
Hello, and welcome to this lightning talk about Stoicism and leadership. My name is Andi. I'm a former attorney and former corporate IT leader, and now I work as a leadership development coach. In my practice, I work with overwhelmed leaders, and I help them to prioritize, focus, and build high-performing teams. And I love it when I can bring Stoic concepts to bear on leadership. There are really two ways that I want to talk about today that Stoicism can impact a person's leadership. First is how that person shows up for their team, and second is how they go about their self-management. As summarized by Daniel Pink in his book Drive, the leadership literature tells us that team members are primarily motivated by three elements: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. As I've thought about how Stoicism has impacted my leadership and that of my clients, I've noticed an interesting relationship between those elements of motivation and the Stoic virtues. Specifically, a Stoic leader can encourage mastery, autonomy, and purpose in their team by focusing on temperance, justice, and courage. By practicing temperance, a Stoic leader can resist the temptation to do too much and can create autonomy by trusting their team to solve problems. Leaders are frequently called upon to play the hero, to jump in, be the expert, solve all the problems, and take charge. But that's a trap. The best leaders aren't heroes. Instead, they empower others. And it takes restraint to avoid that temptation to jump in and solve all the problems. And that's why being a temperate leader helps promote autonomy within the team, because it empowers others to solve their own problems. By practicing justice or fairness, a Stoic leader gives team members the space to develop their mastery. No one likes to be treated unfairly. That's a huge demotivator. Being treated fairly or justly, on the other hand, empowers people to focus on their strengths. Team members in that situation know their contributions will be recognized and rewarded. They'll be treated according to their contributions, and so will everyone else. That mindset encourages the development of competence or mastery. Finally, by practicing courage, a Stoic leader can keep a team on a clear and focused path. That clarity gives team members a sense of purpose. There are many competing priorities and distractions in today's business world. It takes courage to say no, but that's exactly what a leader has to do to protect their team's focus. Some of those competing priorities might be great ideas, but they're not the top priority. So courageous leaders stay focused, say no, and provide clarity and purpose for their team. Of course, there's a Stoic virtue still missing from our model. It's the master virtue of wisdom. In the context of leadership, wisdom has to be ever present as you interact with your team. When to support, when to challenge, when to be serious, when to joke around, when to stay professional, when to get personal. All of that takes balance, and it takes wisdom to achieve that balance. In sum, by bringing the 4 Stoic virtues to work, Stoic leaders can promote autonomy, mastery, and purpose within their teams. By being a good Stoic, you can also put yourself on the path to being a good leader. But how you show up for your team is only part of the formula. We noted earlier that Stoicism also has a lot to say about a leader's self-management. And here I'm thinking primarily about the dichotomy of control. To be clear, the Stoic virtues are also important, but the real crux of self-management and managing your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors is understanding what's within your control and what isn't. And not just understanding it, but living it. Epictetus said it best: always remember what is your own and what belongs to another, and you will not be disturbed. Leaders are tempted to worry about pretty much everything: people, performance, timelines, turnover, budgets, career advancement. It never ends. But none of those things are in our control. All we can control is our own will and our own behaviors. The rest has to take care of itself. As a leader, we can influence, but rarely control. That understanding is the key to proper self-management. If you have questions or would like to learn more, please contact me. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.
Namaste from Stoics in Himalaya. My name is Pankaj. This is a leadership story from the Himalaya. A friend of mine, he called me right after COVID lockdown from London. And apparently he was very excited and happy. And I said, Hari, what makes you so excited and happy? And he said, you know what? I went and climbed the highest point in England. Well, person in Nepal, the highest point in England, not so impressive. But what he said was profound. He said, I trekked and I collected fund for the community of people with disability in the Western Nepal. I could understand and relate to his happiness. Let me show the picture of my friend, Mr. Hari. Yes, as you can see, he is a double amputee, a British Gurkha veteran who lost both of his legs in an ambush in Afghanistan, 2010. But the interesting fact is he did not lose much time. He accepted his reality, moved on, started climbing mountains, the Himalaya, taking sports, and the most importantly, he started working to help people with disability. Similar story, which went pretty much viral in news, Major General Chris Donau, the last American soldier who left Afghanistan on 30th August, just a minute before the midnight, the given deadline. He ensured that everyone was safe and everyone was ready to leave. What he did was not just a leadership by command and control, but care and compassion. So these two stories really makes me think, were they Stoics? I don't know, but their leadership very much relates to what Marcus Aurelius did 2000 plus years ago, or what Nelson Mandela. So if I may share three things, A, B, C of leadership, which is very much backed by Stoic philosophy. A, accept what is not in your control. That's what Hari Budamaga did. After losing his legs and becoming amputee, he did not lose his time. Rather, he gathered his courage and resources to help others and lifting others up. Major General Chris, what he did, he was prepared for the worst. So B stands for be prepared for the worst. Respond instead of reacting. And C, care for others and lift others up. That's what Stoics or the people who believe in Stoic leadership seems to have doing. Whatever business, job, or profession we are in must not necessarily be military leader. We can learn a great deal from these people who are unsung heroes in our society. And when we practice a Stoicism, these A, B, C can definitely help us to become a better version of ourselves, be it as an individual, a professional, or a business leader. So I wish you a great Stoicon-x and happy learning and great leading the world. Thank you and namaste.
Hello everybody, I hope you're doing well. My name is Andi. I've been working in the music industry for the last 8 or 9 years, and I've been practicing Stoicism as a philosophy for a way of living for the last 6 to 7 of those years, and I've definitely noticed a massive difference in my way of living and how I approach everything in life. Today I wanted to talk to you briefly about memento mori and its practices. If you're not familiar with the phrase, it is roughly translated as remember you're mortal. It dates all the way back to ancient Roman times. I've talked at length about the history online, but I really want to focus on the practices today, which, as you might well know, death is a very prevalent topic in Stoic writings, both from the early period right up until the late era Roman Stoics. So memento mori is a phrase typically used as a meditative exercise to tell us that our bodies, our careers, our reputation, our possessions, and even our family can be taken away from us at any time. Therefore, this should not be the primary focus of our lives. You can use the mantra as a reference to all the great and powerful people who have came before us, who are now unfortunately dead and buried. If we're lucky in our lifetime, we'll have approximately 3 billion heartbeats. So how can these words actually assist you with not being careless with those sacred beats? Exercises like this require consistent practice, and don't kid yourself into thinking that only by doing this several times you will have the ability to curtail certain problems or spring into action by rectifying your procrastination without actually doing anything. Stoic philosophy requires you to learn, practice, apply everything, as it is a practical philosophy for life. I'm going to give you 3 exercises that I find particularly useful on the subject. The first one of these being reflecting on your current standing. So it allows you to take a step back from how you go about your daily life and ask yourself, are the things I'm spending my time on worth it? At the end of the day, there's work to be done, and it's part of our nature as human beings to carry out certain duties. We must not dither with those fleeting seconds that pass us by. And I tend to do this a few times a year, not as frequently as I would like to. I would take myself to the mountainside or out on a countryside trail, and this method actually really rallies home whenever I need to make personal changes or professional changes indeed. The second one I wanted to mention was an attitude of gratitude. It may sound very cliched, but simply grab a pen and paper, get a device, and start accumulating a list of things that you're grateful for. What can you think of? For me, it's getting up with good health in the morning, having a warm bed to get up from in the first place, having some fresh coffee, getting outdoors. That these are simple things that you can be grateful for, and you'll be actually surprised if you start doing this regularly, how much in your life that you often overlook. Personally speaking, it's a great method to use whenever you find yourself at an impasse of desiring more, as we often do need a reminder of what we already have in our lives and perhaps don't need more of. The last one is, what if this was your last day? It's not pleasant to think about this, but it doesn't make it any less possible. When I find myself struggling for motivation and at times courage, I referred to this passage from Marcus Aurelius. Remember how long you've been putting this off, how many extensions the gods have given you and you didn't use them. At some point, you have to recognize what the world is that you belong to and what power rules it and from what source it springs. There is a limit to the time assigned to you, and if you don't use it to free yourself, it will be gone and never return. So imagine lying on your deathbed, remembering what's truly important. Do you want to be full of regrets? The exercise doesn't necessarily need to be reserved for major decisions either. I use it to get me out on a run, to take care of important legal matters, or just to take care of general life admin, which can get in the way as well. You can contextualize it and make it fit your own circumstances. It is your duty as a citizen to not leave any stone unturned. It's important to focus on these exercises and take your time with them. It's not going to come naturally to you if you haven't tried it before. I just want to remember a phrase that I really like, which is memento vivere, which means remember you have to live. Enjoy your time with your family, with your friends, with people around you. But memento mori certainly serves its purpose if used correctly to getting the most out of your life. At least I feel that way anyway. But before I go, I just want to thank Modern Stoicism and Harald and Greg. I really appreciate being able to talk today. If you want to find out more about memento mori, you can look me up on the Irish Stoic, and I've written extensively about further exercise and the history. I want to wish you all good fortune. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.
Hi, my name's Chris Halbert. I'm the magistrate at a place called Wagga Wagga. It's about 5 hours drive south of Sydney and about 5 hours drive north of Melbourne. This is my first Stoicon, and I'm very excited to be here with you all, even if it is only virtually. The title of this lightning talk is How to Help Our Judges Decide Like a Roman Emperor. Now, like a lot of you, I'm lucky enough to live in a place that has the rule of law. The rule of law is important because it protects us, it protects our rights, it protects our property, not just against other citizens, but also against the state. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, so long as the law is safe, so is the city and the citizen. So here's the problem. How do we keep the law safe? Well, there's an appeals mechanism, of course, but ultimately appeals are expensive and they take time, and whoever's hearing the appeal is a human being, just as the original decision maker was. And if those human beings are struggling psychologically, that's going to have an impact on the quality of their decisions. Increasingly, research is being done into the effects of stress and trauma on judicial officers and their decision making. We know that judicial officers are exposed to high levels of trauma in high pressure environments. And the research is showing that there are high levels of psychological distress in judicial officers, which raises concerns about things like post-traumatic stress disorder and burnout in the judiciary. We also know from the research that there are a range of issues that are causing stress and trauma for the judiciary, and they have been identified in the literature. I recently started trying to synthesise some of the sources of judicial stress, initially to help myself, but I pretty quickly worked out if they could be identified, we could share that information so that other judicial officers could try and inoculate themselves against judicial stress, and the whole system would be better for that. At the time that I was reading that material, I was also reading a couple of other books, which the audience at Stoicon will be very familiar with. Firstly, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson, and also by Donald Robertson, Build Your Resilience. It seemed to me pretty clear that there was a link between Stoicism, as that is seen through the lens of modern evidence-based cognitive behavioural therapy, and the sources of stress that have been identified in the research material on judicial stress and judicial wellness. The other thing that struck me was that Marcus Aurelius, as well as being emperor, was also a judge, and it seems to me that he would be the ideal vehicle to introduce Stoicism to judicial officers. And so it's against that background that I have 4 questions. Firstly, what can the modern judge learn from the meditations of Marcus Aurelius to help to address the areas of concern that the research has identified? Secondly, how can those learnings be linked to modern treatment and prevention modalities for stress, trauma and resilience? Thirdly, how can the answers to the first 2 questions be succinctly packaged and distributed to all courts in a variety of languages? And finally, is there a willingness in the global Stoic community to collaborate to make this knowledge freely available? Because, as Marcus said, so long as the law is safe, so is the city and the citizen. Thank you for listening, and have a great Stoicon.
Hi, I'm Alison McCone, and I'm here to present a case for how a modern Stoic can respond to ageing. How does the Stoic sage deal with age? Stoics prepare for the end of the road by focusing on death, but surely if we're being rational and reasonable, we should devote a healthy amount of time trying to get the best value out of the remainder of the journey, no matter how short or long it is. Marcus Aurelius in the Meditations calls himself to action by saying, "The time you have left is short. Live it as if you were on a mountain. Here or there makes no difference if wherever you live you take the world as your city. Let men see, let them observe a true man living in accordance with nature." If we take Marcus's advice, we shouldn't worry about where we are in space. Just follow the natural course of the aging process on the way to the summit. By thinking back to our younger days, we can remember climbing many mountains. Even molehills may have felt like the Pyrenees at times. As we've grown, we've earned the right to be at the top of our own mountain by exercising the virtue of courage along the way. Listen to Marcus, wander around that mountain, enjoy the view, and make yourself comfortable in your inner city or citadel. One skill we can keep working on as we age is character development. The ancient Stoic advice is straightforward. Keep working on growing the virtues. We've had the courage to get this far, but we've used wisdom too. Modern Stoics are modest enough to know that despite having lots of experience, they need to be lifelong learners. Parts of our body may be ailing and failing, but one of the best responses to aging is to take extra care of our own brain health. A recent study of almost 2,000 people in the 80-plus age bracket found that dementia can be delayed by as much as 5 years by engaging in intellectual activities such as reading, puzzle solving, or card games. Marcus Aurelius echoes this when he says, "The directing mind is that which wakes itself, adapts itself, makes itself of whatever nature it wishes, and makes all that happens to it appear in the way it wants." If fate grants us the privilege of aging, it is worth considering how the virtue of justice plays a part. We're lucky to be here. By being just to those around us, by showing them love and consideration, we can help to remove the fear of aging and death that many people experience as they follow in our footsteps. Existential angst is a feature of many lives, and mortality anxiety is just one component. By appealing to justice, the trajectory of our lives can be accepted and a deeper knowledge of human nature can develop. Musonius Rufus writes, "When a human being lives for virtue, he deserves praise and can rightly think well of himself and be hopeful and courageous. A cheerful disposition and secure joy automatically accompany these attributes." The Stoic who learns from the world around them as they travel through the school of life are well equipped to complete the course. Musonius says, "In his old age, this person would use these lessons to live according to nature. He would endure without regret being deprived of the pleasures connected with youth." He is advising us to employ the virtue of temperance as a defense against old age. By listening to our bodies, we may realize we need to adjust certain behaviors. But remember, pleasure comes in various guises, and sensual fulfillment should be a feature of aging life for the modern-day Stoic. Thankfully, good old Sciacca has our backs. He says, "We should cherish old age and enjoy it. It is full of pleasure if you know how to use it. Fruit tastes most delicious just when its season is ending. Every pleasure defers till its last its greatest delights, and even the age that stands on the brink has pleasures of its own." When I found Stoic philosophy in 2012, eudaimonia was unfamiliar to me. I was in the self-loathing camp of victimhood, and my response to an existential crisis was more like, "You die? Moan here." So how can we turn that sort of feeling around and begin to experience the zest for living that modern-day Stoics score so highly on? Maybe time to give a final shout out to our old friend Epictetus, the master of proairesis. Well-being may be the course of choice for the younger folk, but during the third act of life we need to work a bit harder and resort to will-being. We can choose how to age well before someone else tries to make our decisions for us. As Epictetus states, above all, nature demands that we conform and adapt our will to our idea of what's right and useful. Thank you and happy aging.
I'm Stoic Dan from Orlando, Florida. Today you will hear great presentations by the foremost speakers in modern Stoicism. They'll share with you the best ideas for improving your life, to become more virtuous, more rational, to smooth out the elements of your life that are rough. Why else would we study Stoicism? Well, in the first volume of the great books, you've seen this series in used bookstores. There's about 50 volumes, and they were published back in 1952. And in the first volume, edited by Robert Maynard Hutchins, he writes in the preface that the great books of humanity will not solve all of our problems, but they will shed light on our basic problems, and it would be folly to live without this light. He writes on page 13 of the preface, he says, "We believe that the reduction of the citizen to an object of propaganda, private and public, is one of the great dangers to democracy. A prevalent notion is that the great mass of people cannot understand and cannot form an independent judgment upon any matter. They cannot be educated in the sense of developing their intellectual powers, but they can be bamboozled. The reiteration of slogans, the distortion of the news, the great storm of propaganda that beats upon the citizen 24 hours a day, all his life long, mean either that democracy must fall a prey to the loudest and most persistent propagandists, or that the people must save themselves by strengthening their minds so that they can appraise the issues for themselves." Well, I'll repeat that last part. The people must save themselves by strengthening their minds. So I hope today that you'll take the ideas from Stoicon, take them to heart and to mind. Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius gave us a great many quotes that we can help to smooth out our lives. It will add to our character and our values. And you may find that some of them appeal to you more than others. So find the quotes and ideas that appeal to you, journal about them, practice them, and if you're wondering, Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius are included in the series of great books. They're in volume 12. Thanks for watching.
This is Anup from Chicago. I grew up in India in a religious Hindu family, and like many others, learned about Gita at home and school organically. Early on, I learned about the idea of sthita pragya in Sanskrit, which means still mind or steady intellect. Mind that is on a stable footing, unshakable by the surrounding vagaries. I was enamored by the strength of this ideal state, and the concept stayed with me. As I grew older and read more literature in English, I came across the word Stoic, and when I looked up the meaning, I was surprised to find the similarity with Sthita Pragya. It sparked an interest in Stoicism, and I've been fascinated by the parallels across the two philosophies since then. A quick intro to Bhagavad Gita, which means the divine song. It is one of the most respected Hindu religious scriptures and has the same sacred status in India for taking oath as the Bible has in the US. It has 700 verses and is part of the Mahabharata, the longest epic poem in the world, with 200,000 verses. Gita is the dialogue between Arjun, the warrior prince who has to go to war against his own extended family members and friends, and Krishna, who is his close friend and guide, playing the role of his charioteer. The dialogue is set right in the battleground just before the battle begins, as Arjun is overcome with strong emotions and has a near panic attack, and Krishna counsels him on self-control, duty, and the ideal of selfless action to uphold dharma, that is, righteousness. Gita was written in about 500 BC, much before the term Hindu was coined. And as Stoicism was founded around 300 BC, Gita probably predates it by a couple of hundred years. I've not come across any direct, definitive evidence of influence across the two, but in my humble opinion, if the two systems of thought across the globe at different time points independently arrived at similar ideas, it makes those ideas even more likely to be closer to the universal truth and of immense value to us as conceptual direction markers for leading a good life. For current mindshare, if you accept searches on Google as proxy of interest, then this is a snapshot of the relative popularity of Gita and Stoicism over past 17 years. I'm happy to see a steady rise in both over the past 5 years or so. While there are many differences across the two, I've picked a handful of ideas from Gita that appear to have parallels in Stoic thought to pique your interest for future investigation. The verse on the left is probably the most well-known verse of Gita, and it directs us to view duty and right to action as its own reward, and relinquish the desire for the fruits of your labor. If you can achieve this attitude, every moment of life's journey can be joyous, and there would be no need to wait to arrive at a happy destination. The Stoics also recognize non-attachment as an essential virtue and advise seeking inner contentment without the dependence on external praise or reward. Anger is seen in both systems as a major weakness and folly of human mind. Stoics called it the short madness, and Gita explains that anger causes delusion, loss of memory, and leads to decline in intelligence. Both systems place agency on the self and hold your own mind and perception as the primary cause. Gita asks you to bootstrap the self with your mind as it's the best friend and the worst enemy. And Stoics explain that things don't upset us, our judgment of the things do. And anxiety lies within our own perceptions, not outside. Both systems place immense value on self-control and discipline, and they treat it as a skill that can be nurtured and grown with repetitive control and practice. Gita sets the ideal to be unperturbed by the pleasant or the unpleasant and sees it as a path to transcendence. And Stoics are earthlier, and they see it as a path to a joyous and virtuous life here and now. Both emphasize on being steady and grounded and ask us to moderate the pendulum swing between the excessive cheerfulness and deep despair. And this brings us back to where we started. May you all be sthitapragya, may you all find equanimity and balance. I thank you for your attention and this opportunity.
Hey everyone, my name is Tim Iverson and I am with the Minnesota Stoics and very happy to be with you today. I wanted to begin my short video with a quote from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and it's from Book 5 and Chapter 2. He says to shrug it all off and wipe it clean, every annoyance and distraction, and reach utter stillness, child's play. So we can imagine that an ancient emperor of Rome was pretty much overwhelmed with politics and administrative duties. And yet Marcus says in this passage that we can let go of all those distractions and worries and just be still. So if you're like me, your plate is full with all the information we have coming over social media, the news, 24/7 news cycles, families, pets. A lot of us are feeling the stress of overwhelm. But in our Stoic practice, we can always take a moment of stillness or mindfulness. For you, it might be journaling, it might be prayer, it might be just listening to some music. I like to take a few moments of mindfulness every day. That's been part of my practice for many years. Some mornings it's just a few moments, others it's much longer, but I always find it refreshing. And as Marcus said, the theory is quite simple. It's child's play. Now, it's not always easy, but it is a simple practice. So I wanted to share with you today a brief meditation that I've created to help you do that. And I'm going to use the acronym STOA. STOA. The S is for stop and be still. The T is for to take a nice, deep, conscious breath. The O is for observe, especially observing non-judgmentally. And the A is for allowing and accepting whatever we are experiencing. So I'll walk us through this, and then we'll move on with the rest of your day. So the S is to just come to a stop and let yourself become as still as you can. No need to be rigid, just let yourself stop. Just stop what you're doing. Let your muscles relax as best you can. Just enjoying a moment of stillness. The T is for to take a breath. So let's really focus on a nice deep breath. Inhaling and exhaling. Appreciating the miracle of being alive. And so the O is observe. So here we expand our attention from our breath, kind of around our breath, and just noticing ourselves just sitting. Maybe you're standing, but most of us are sitting. Just notice the sensations, the information coming from our body. So we could start with our legs and feet, just noticing the sensations that are present without judging. Moving up to our chest and stomach. Now observing our arms and hands. And if your mind gets distracted, you can just shrug it off, as Marcus says, and come back to the focus of your attention, which is our body. Moving up into our shoulders. And now our face. Taking just a moment to notice what thoughts are running through your mind. And we can open our eyes. And that's your Stoa meditation. Please have a good rest of your day.
All right. So thank you again to all the speakers. And Phil asked me to say something about making lightning talks in the future. And I'm not sure if we've discussed that already, Greg, but there's probably going to be an announcement at some point at Stoicism today.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about for the next Stoicon, obviously that's a good ways off in the future. But lightning talks have really caught on. I think actually they first started with the Stoicon-x in Toronto, I want to say 2017. So there's a lot of Stoicon-x's that do lightning talks. And if this is the sort of thing that you want to do, you might check out all the Stoicon-x events that are coming up. Some of them are in person, but quite a few of them are also online. And it's a great thing to do. I think a lot of people do them and then realize that maybe they would like to do longer talks. It's a way of getting your feet wet. For us on the other end, it's a way of identifying speaker talent that we might want to tap in the future. But we should think about this not just in terms of Stoicon, but the worldwide Stoic community. Since we have these, online events like we do, it's not unusual to see people crossing virtual borders all over the place and talking at Stoas all over the world. Rob asked, what's the name of our Stoa meditation presenter? Everything is in the handbook that we've put links to, so you can, all these questions that people have about where to find different people, there's Tim Iverson putting his thing. You can find it all in those things that we put into the Dropbox specifically for that. So I think that will be very helpful for people. There was a question as well about books that people have written. In the coming week, we will be putting together a list of books from the various speakers and sending that out to you by email. Obviously, we're not going to like put it together on the fly during the middle of the conference. Anything else that you want to say, Harald? We've got a minute or so before the next session.
Well, we might plug the possibility of writing for Stoicism today.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Given that we're the editors. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'll put a link in the chat. And I just sent it to Phil again, sorry. So, yeah, there's some information there. And I think we got posts lined up for next weeks at least. But yeah, check it out. And if you want to write, there's ample opportunity.
So I will mention that we have a tradition of publishing a lot of these talks as transcripts in Stoicism Today, so you'll see them coming out. Patricia asks, can you repeat the place to find the workbook? It's been linked to a number of times, so if you scroll up, you'll see it, but if Phil could shoot it out there one more time to the Dropbox link, that would be awesome as well. Anything else you want to say to sign off, Harald, before we switch over?
No, thank you. This is great. Oh, one thing. I think I did the lightning talk some years ago, and it did have that effect on me. I mean, it was a great way to actually test out public speaking, and so yeah, I can vouch for that.